All right, you are live.
Wonderful. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to tonight's meeting of the Planning Commission for the City of Annapolis. My name is Teresa Pico. You'll notice that I've had a name change for those that have attended previous meetings. I am stepping in for our chairman, Alex Pline. He is on the call, but I'll be leading today's discussion. And we will go ahead and get started with our agenda. And so first order of business that we have today. So I'll call this meeting to order. It is 7:04 p.m. And if we can have the roll call, please.
Mr. Pline.
Present.
Mr. Waldman. He'll be arriving shortly, I believe. Ms. Pico.
Here.
Ms. Butler.
Here.
Mr. Iams.
Here.
Mr. Sale.
Here.
Mr. Svakianudis.
Here.
Thank you. Will we be doing a roll call for the Historic Preservation Commission as well, since this is a joint meeting?
I don't think that's necessary. We, in the past, have just been guest attendees. And this doesn't constitute a direct meeting. So
Thank you. Appreciate it.
thank you, though. Thanks for asking.
So we'll move on to new business. So today we have a presentation on the City Dock Resiliency Plan by Annapolis Mobility and Resiliency Partners. Resilience Partners, excuse me. This is a presentation to both the Planning Commission and the Historic Preservation Commission. And so we'll move on into new business. So if Miss Eileen Fogarty can take in, I would appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Teresa. And if you can put up the images, the first image, which I think everyone has seen before, but it's our inspirational image. We want to thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to share the progress that's taken place with the City Dock project, but most importantly tonight to hear from both the Planning Commission and the HPC, your thoughts, your ideas in terms of the direction that this project is going. Our team tonight is, and we should be clear, AMRP is the private partner, but the city is very much the public partner in this. Our team will be focusing on the development of the City Dock Park. And when you see this rolled out this evening, I think you will all recognize the ideas and the recommendations that you have made for us in the summer for resiliency barriers and for the park itself reflected in this design. The designers have also, in addition to hearing from both the HPC and the Planning Commission, have been working throughout the fall with several of the City Dock Action Committee teams. You'll hear from Chris this evening, Haley for the Legacy team, the Finance team, and the Design team, which has several of our local architects and landscape architects on it. And last week, we met with the full City Dock Action Committee to get their support before bringing these designs to you. So tonight, I see, which is very exciting for us, that our city manager is on the phone or on the call, Mike Malinoff. Hello, we're glad you're with us.
Thank you, Eileen.
And one other introduction, we are very excited to introduce all of you to Burr Vogel. And David, you may want to make some comments, but Burr is our new city engineer. He'll be managing the construction of the City Dock project. He comes to the city with a tremendous amount of experience, both in the Navy and in other areas. David, do you want to add anything before we get everybody to meet Burr?
Well, first of all, I'll say that unfortunately I have the news that Lisa Greco has now retired. So
Right.
As of February 1st, she was retired. So she's got big shoes to fill, but Burr definitely can fill those. So he's a retired Navy captain, Civil Engineer Corps, has lots of experience with large projects and large programs. We're just really thrilled to have him here. Couldn't have a better person to backfill behind Lisa. So he's going to be the direct project manager on this for us and will be very involved. So he is on the call.
Can you all
everyone.
see Burr? There he
Hi.
is, Burr.
Hi, Eileen. Thank you, David.
Great.
Great to
So
see
now
everyone.
everyone knows what you look like and how to get you. So with those introductions, you're going to be hearing tonight from, first of all, Mayor Buckley, who will provide the broader context for the city dock as the catalyst and the anchor for the city's entire water access strategy. Then you will hear from David Gerald, our Public Works Director, who will update you on several aspects of the city dock project, as well as the garage itself. And again, all good news. Chris Haley will be sharing the most recent work of the legacy team. And then Bryce Turner, who is the master planner for the project, and Scott Reichel, who is a designer and landscape architect, will unveil the detailed approach for activating the City Dock Park. So with that, I think we want to kick it off to our mayor, Mayor Buckley. Next slide, please.
Welcome everybody. It is an honor to be in front of both these boards. I want to thank you for the hard work you all do, the thankless work that you do. So we truly appreciate you. I know I speak for myself and the whole City Council in thanking the City Dock Action Committee for their efforts. Like you've heard me joke about before, getting 100 people to agree on anything in the city of Annapolis is historic. But we have consensus on what will be the next phase for City Dock. Our City Dock has been many things. Some of them we're not so proud of, and some of them we are proud of. But we all are proud of our city. I want to make sure that we understand that this City Dock has been things that such as a place to drive your car onto a boat to get across the Chesapeake Bay because there was no bridge. It's been a place where in the breadbasket of the Eastern Shore was dropped into this port and then distributed to around the region. It's been a place where slaves have been brought to this country to be sold. It has been many, many things. There's been a place where huge oil tanks sat, where you could fill up your car with gasoline. I campaigned 5 years ago on a park, not a parking lot. And I would say that, you know, I know we always like to hold Europe on a pedestal, but nobody would use the best real estate in the city for a place to park an automobile. And we have managed to build a new garage to satisfy the loss of parking that will happen, and there will be a net gain of parking when all this project is finished. We've managed to finance this in such a creative way that we will not have to go to the local taxpayer. I can tell you, I'm chasing money every day to try and make this thing a fully funded project, the largest capital project in the city's history. And we are finding amazing ways to fund this. And we're getting funding because we can make such a compelling case for the end result. Many things are going to be achieved with this design. Not only will we have that barrier against sea level rise that we all fear for the historic district and the commercial area of downtown, but also a public space that can be shared. And then it's not just about sea level rise, it's about the next catastrophic event. When this park is built, the city will be protected from the next Isabel. What I like to talk about is the fact that when I came into office, a lot of people said that they didn't feel welcome downtown, that there wasn't things for them to do. And my people don't go there. And that was shameful. That made me sad. And so we made sure that many people contributed to this idea. It is a collection of wonderful, creative thoughts. I want to thank Eileen for the amazing job that she's done in putting all those thoughts together and appeasing so many people. Not everybody's going to get what they want, but most people are going to appreciate the outcome here. Of course, you might have heard that we just pulled down a $3 million mobility grant from the federal government for an electric ferry. I've said this all along. If any of you have been to Seattle, Sydney Harbor, cities like that, where people move around on the water and mobility on the water is part of the lifestyle, it's been a missed opportunity in the city of Annapolis and other cities on the Chesapeake Bay. We're going to correct that with this new city dock. Not only will we have this great public space that all people will feel welcome on, but many people are going to be able to get on a boat for the first time and for free. And it's going to go to places that we didn't even think about before, such as a thing we're very proud of, Carr's Beach, the last 6 acres of a historic music venue that was on the Green Book, on the Chitlin Circuit, where the coolest people in the planet came to Annapolis for 3 decades. We're going to revive that green space and do a heritage park there that will be put Annapolis on the map for equity when it comes to green space. We're also going to give access to some of the less fortunate people in our community, people who live on the water but have no access to water. We have 2 public housing communities that are built on the water with no water views or no water access. We are going to reverse that with this idea.
Next slide for Gavin to show what he's talking about.
So we can go to the next slide. I've kind of covered all this. There is the one for Carr's Beach. You would have read about this in the newspapers. You would have seen the efforts that went in to pull down $6 to $7 million to save this piece of land from development. You know that Senator Cardin has given the city of Annapolis a $2 million earmark to make improvements. You know, we are aggressively chasing the mall property so that we can make a visitor center for Carr's Beach, but also a home for Blacks of the Chesapeake, so we can talk about the amazing contribution that these communities did to the evolution of not just Annapolis, but the whole country. And the next slide is a little piece of silted in cove called Hawkins Cove. If you go down there today, you'll see things thrown in the water and stuck in the mud. You'll see a pier that you can barely walk on. Someone's lit a fire on. We are going to make an amazing park that'll be worth going to from City Dock. So you'll be able to get out, walk in a boardwalk and connect Eastport all the way through to the Truxton Park and the Truxton Park boat ramp and all the great amenities we have at Truxton Park, such as Pip Moy Rec Center and the new pool and, of course, the new tennis and pickleball courts. Next slide. We are working, if any of you drive down Forest Drive, and this is going to have a few more challenges, you'll see massive piles of trash that we pulled out of a piece of land that belonged half to the state and half to the Department of Defense. We have petitioned for that land to come to the city so we can activate College Creek in multiple ways. A small park, a nature park there, potentially with a rowing facility, a boardwalk along the St. John's side so that you can go, called the College Creek Connector, so you can go underneath the Road Boulevard Bridge, and before that go past St. Anne's Cemetery, an amazing piece of history in this city that not a lot of people can appreciate, but a cemetery that 200 or 300 years ago wasn't segregated. That said something about Annapolis, that in an era when cemeteries were segregated, we had an unsegregated cemetery. So that story, the first mayor is buried there. Multiple famous people are buried in that thing, and we love to talk about the history of cemeteries like they do in Boston. But you'll be able to go past that cemetery underneath the Road Boulevard Bridge, and then on past the St. John's Boathouse and up onto King George Street, and then connect out to the Severn River Bridge and the B&A Trail and beyond. And so people from those neighborhoods will be able to come in safely, walk, run, bike, and be in our beautiful capital city without putting their lives in danger. Next slide, please. So I want to thank the committee that did all, the legacy committee that did all this work to make this city dock something that every single person in this city is going to feel proud of, and is going to want to visit and is going to want to show off. And with that, I will pass it on to the next presenter. Thank you.
Thanks. Now, David Gerald, next slide.
Thank you, Mayor. So first of all, it's good to see everybody. It's been a little while since we got an opportunity to talk to you about this project, so it's good to see you all again. Before I jump into these slides, I first want to thank you all for the feedback and the input and the collaboration that you gave us on the Hillman Garage project. From our view, that was a very successful effort and process. And now we look forward to the same sort of input and feedback. And I guess most importantly, concurrence with the direction that we're going on this project. That's what we're seeking tonight is for you to understand, ask questions, but then eventually concur with where we're going with this project. We met last week, as Eileen said, with the City Dock Action Committee. They were very supportive of the direction, and so we look forward to presenting it to you all as well. I think you all are aware these two projects, the garage project and the City Dock project, are tied together. The garage project is a P3, public-private partnership, wherein the developer is going to have control of the garage for 30 years. And the City Dock project is a public project that is being funded completely by the city, mostly through grants and through the concession payment. So the good news is the garage is moving right along. I'm sure all of you that have driven by there lately have seen that. All of the major concrete pours are complete. It's the garage is topped out. We have a little ceremony tomorrow to celebrate the topping out of the garage. So that's moving along. The P3 partnership has proven to be a successful financial model. We're going to talk about where the money for the City Dock project is coming from, but a large share of it is coming due to the P3 for the garage. And that has allowed us to move forward with the project, the P3, much more quickly than if the city had done it itself. So next slide, please. So we talked a little bit about the City Dock Action Committee. They developed this consensus plan, and as the mayor said, that was nothing short of a miracle that they were able to come together and agree on a consensus plan. That plan is our roadmap for the City Dock project, and we're following it closely. And we're going to talk about some deviations from that tonight, but to a large degree, we're following that as a roadmap. We met with them last week, and they were very, very strongly supportive and endorsed the project. So some of the things that we are deviating on somewhat, we're trying to make the park area more active, an activated park, and we'll talk about how we're doing that. We're increasing the legacy efforts even more than I think the City Dock Action Committee envisioned, and a lot of the support and the compliments that they provide was because of those efforts on the legacy side. And we've added a new fountain that really is a focal point for the park. We think that you will enjoy seeing that. We think it's a great improvement to the project, and we'll talk about that later. So next slide, please. So as an update on and these are going to be quick because I know you don't care as much about the financial aspects, but as an update on the garage and the City Dock project, the developer had financial closing back in September for the overall project, $68.6 million for the new garage and for the contribution to the City Dock project. The contribution from that 68 million is about 24.5 million is going to be the contribution from the P3 to the City Dock project. Next slide. So where's the money coming from? Money's always the issue, right? We had the City Dock project cost updated. It was about 40 million a couple of years ago when we first proposed this, but inflation in construction has been really significant. So the updated cost estimate is about 50 million. When Governor Hogan was still in office, he supported us $10 million of state capital grant for the project. We've got commitments of 6.6 million from the federal government. The 3.2 million from EDA is being used to support the design cost. The concession payment I mentioned, 24.5. We are putting in a request to the brand new Resilience Financing Authority for $10 million, and we're confident that that's going to come through. That was a big reason why the Resilience Financing Authority was formed, was to help support this project. We're also putting in a large grant application to FEMA because this project very closely fills the criteria that they're trying to provide funding for. So we're confident that we'll get a pretty significant amount of money from FEMA as well. So next slide, please. So as a further update on the new garage, the construction is progressing well. We had an extremely aggressive schedule, and we'll talk to that in just a minute, but we're on schedule. The capacity of the garage is going to increase from 425 spaces for the old garage to 588 spaces in the new garage. I think you all are probably very familiar with this since you heard a lot of briefs and provide a lot of input. It's going to include green components such as EV chargers, solar panels, and we're also adding a lot of flexibility with the parking on the ground level so we can use that for other purposes. So next slide. So as I mentioned, the garage is on schedule. On schedule means that it's going to be completed in June of this year. We didn't want to go through 2 summers without a Hillman garage. So June is the completion time frame, and we're on schedule. It's looking great. Whiting Turner's a world-class organization, and they've proved it with this project. So let's move on to the next slide. So this is a rendering that you all probably have seen before, but this is kind of updated and shows the ground floor being activated. It looks like this is a function like a farmer's market type of activity that we can do. We can roll up the doors. We're trying to make Gorman Street a more appealing place to be. And that's our new garage. So I will pass it back to Eileen.
Thanks so much. You have all, next slide, please, either seen or experienced, hopefully, several of the new mobility options. They continue to attract significant ridership. The Magenta shuttle, which I know many of you have been on, is now has over 60,000 riders this past year. It has tripled the ridership of the shuttles in the prior year in 2021. So that's been a great success and a somewhat of a surprise that it has so many people have used it. We will also be having new electric trolleys, part of the city's 100% electric plan. They will be rolling out this spring. We anticipate March, and they will be operating throughout the downtown to move people around downtown Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And then next slide, you have all, I'm sure, seen the VIA, or as we would know it, Annapolis Go vehicles. They have been going strong. They've been consistently expanding. And as you would expect, a lot of their ridership are younger people because the entire service is through an app. They will be expanding. The county wants them to come into the county. I believe we're looking at March 1st for them to go to the mall and the areas in the county. They're also going to be expanding in the city along the Forest Drive corridor and down Edgewood Road. So that has been a tremendous success. And again, if anyone has taken it, we have gotten mostly very high marks for it. The other element that I wanted to mention, because it came up today in discussion with some visitors, is that there is valet parking available 18 hours a day from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. at the city dock. It is at the Waterfront Hotel, and there will be, we expect by the middle of February, public valet parking available at St. Mary's as well. I understand that contract is moving forward, and there'll be an opportunity for both employees and the public to park there. So all good news. And with that overview, we're going to go to the next slide, and Bryce Turner will talk to you about the big picture of the design of the park itself.
Elaine, thank you very much. And it's great to be with you all again. As David said, it has been a little while. You know, the mayor spoke about the gateway to the Chesapeake and the historic sites and legacy that either emanated from or arrived at Annapolis, and that should really be celebrated at City Dock. And the design team took a lot of inspiration really from this image and that discussion, and felt that this was a great place to start the conversation about design and planning and the big picture and all the people that have come to Annapolis and the activities that they had when they arrived at City Dock. Next slide, please. So, you know, with the action committee, we developed a consensus plan that was really a canvas upon which the robust programming and casual access to the water could occur. And that was very important to everyone involved with the action committee. There was a host of programming ideas that want to occur here, and great input that we've got from citizens. And so now we're starting to take that information and thinking about how that really plays out within the City Dock Park. And so this canvas now, we're fortunate to have, after the RFP process, a world-class architecture, landscape architecture firm of Mahan Reichel to help us add some definition to this now and to define and develop this plan. And so we're excited to be looking at that tonight. And so you will see some new things that we're very excited about. Next slide, please. But the overall concept has stayed the same. And that was to take the ing out of parking, make a green park, and let that green park be elevated to really hold back the floodwaters that we've experienced. Along with that, of course, are the pumps that we're installing to take care of flooding that's come up through the drains. And that's happening on both sides of Ego Alley. But so this resiliency is incredibly important to protect the investment in the historic core of Annapolis and all the things that we're talking about here. So we've got various components to the resiliency program that are important. As I mentioned, we've got this raised, elevated piece that will be the park itself, and which is makes a very natural barrier, which is low walls, steps, terracing, planters, etc. And then we are using flood devices that are generally passive in the way that they operate, although we're also looking at mechanical type devices that are deployed only in the event of a flood. And then we're also adding to implement an additional barrier to complement the concrete bulkhead that we have now, which is approximately elevation 5, a little bit less we're finding in actuality. Next slide, please. So you've seen this before, but there are 3 types of barriers that we just want to review with you today quickly. And one is, that's shown in orange on the left, is the passive horizontal barrier. We call it the flip up. And this device requires what we call a wiper wall. You can see in the image in the middle there on the left, that it has to wipe up against that in order to create a seal and to hold back water. We are using that in some places. We're proposing that. In other places, we really like the one that's shown in the middle, the passive vertical barrier, which we like to call the pop-up. And that really works by, it raises into place. It's deployed from the water that enters a cavity below grade and lifts the barrier up in a flood event. And so there's a certain natural beauty about that, I think, in its function. The other is a glass flood wall, and we are proposing that in very few areas. And it really can be frameless at the top, like you see in the top photo there, and obviously has a lot of benefits by being glass, and it works well in certain locations. Next slide, please. So this is the diagram that we're currently using that shows at the very top at the Naval Academy, Gate 0, and the path of our flood barrier all the way really through to Newman Street. And you'll see in yellow is where we have the pop-up barrier, the one that goes straight up. And in red, you'll see the physical barrier that we're creating with the park and the steps and the low walls and the planting, which is a very nice way to protect downtown. And then around the water itself, we think it's absolutely important that we have as much visibility as possible, as little disruption, if you will, from the flood barrier process. And so what's shown in yellow there around Ego Alley is the pop-up barrier. And so when it is in place, you see the top of it in the pavement, and it only deploys, of course, in a flood event. And then as we get around to Donner Park, there is one area of blue there where we're proposing glass. And that's really due to the fact that there's already a wall there, and we've got a generator there as well. And just due to extreme cost, we think it's the right way to go for that particular small section. It also acts as a safety barrier along Compromise Street, where it's incredibly tight sidewalk condition. Next slide, please. So what we'd like to do is, this is a rendering of the foot of Ego Alley, I would call it, where you can see on the left that when the flood barrier is not deployed, when the pop-up barrier is not activated, we simply have one small post where it terminates and turns the corner. And then on the bottom right, you can see where it is engaged and deployed. And that would only be, of course, during a flood event, and it can rise in various stages as necessary. So next slide. So one of the really important components, obviously has been the cultural legacy here. And so we're fortunate to have Chris Haley with us today to talk about this. So I'll just pass it off to Chris and come back in a few minutes.
Thanks so much, Bryce. I appreciate this opportunity, and thank you all for having the whole committee here today, and also allowing me this opportunity just to share some of where we're going with this. Part of what's so, I think, wonderful about this whole process, and one I want to I guess encourage all of us to breathe in this process that we're going through right now, because right where we are now with everything that's been discussed by our team is the expansiveness of how we're approaching City Dock Reimagined, and how we're approaching it from I'm calling it the northern portion where my uncle's statue is, to all the way down to the end where Susan Campbell Park, and you go out into the water. And initially, when we were thinking about this, it was quite frankly a daunting task to come up with an idea that Bryce and his team could bring into physical manifestation that would represent diversity, represent inclusion, represent all the different ethnic backgrounds who have contributed to Annapolis's existence since its settlement. And so what we've come up now with all the different thoughts that have come through the different committees is that we shouldn't limit it to just one item, or to just one symbol, or to just one thing. It should be spread about specifically throughout this park, because it's all about the park being an active experience for our community, both the community who probably works right there at City Dock, and those who visit us from inside and outside of the state and from the whole United States, and those who probably visit us, quite frankly, just because they're doing documentaries about immigration or about slavery or about the Haleys or whatever, that this is something that we now realize is too big to encompass in one small symbolic structure. So that's why some of it will be spread out to the Haley Memorial, spread out to the UNESCO Middle Passage marker, to having installed an area where the Chesapeake watermen can be represented. And within that, there's going to be a fountain, which will incorporate, we have different thoughts about that, but it can incorporate text, it can incorporate lighting, it can incorporate water showers that kids can play in. Kids can kick balls or just kick water and splash each other in when it's a very, very hot day, and to look out over the water and think in terms of where their ancestors might have emigrated from hundreds of years ago to settle in Annapolis, and then from there go on to wherever they went to in Maryland or even the rest of the United States. And that's what's so exciting about this, because within this process, we have looked at trying to limit ourselves to trying to find one image and open ourselves up to a limitless possibilities of what we can do within this City Dock. And within that, I was just scribbling some things down while I was just listening to the presentation. And of course, industriousness is something we always want to think about, which is what we want to represent those people who, even to this day, continue to represent and to facilitate and to create and to contribute whatever their specialty is, whether it's clothing, whether it's food, whether it's fine arts, but contributing that. And within that, I like to think of an image of a crayon box where you have all these different sticks that are stuck together in this box. And sometimes you open up the box and you can breathe a little bit of the different air of all these different sticks which have color on them. And if you rub on the color, it comes off a little bit and you have a little bit of that residue there. And even though they're crowded and even though they're stuck together, when you open up the box and you take out each individual tube, they all contribute their own individual color, and yet it adds to the whole. And I think that's what we're trying to create here, is that this is a crayon box of all the different persons and all the different communities and all the different constituencies who have created our legacy that we're trying to represent here. And I just want to encourage everyone to, as we go through this process, the garage, the street, the barriers, is to really think and try to embrace it. Because I wrote down here, it's just like you don't forget to enjoy this journey, because there's going to come a time when this journey's over, when it's going to be there. And you see these wonderful diagrams that we have here, which Bryce is going to go into later, and it won't be a diagram, it's going to be real life. And you're just going to experience everything and love everything. And it might be hard to remember back when we were sitting at our homes in front of our monitors, thinking about, wow, what will this be like? When is this ever going to happen? And then it has happened. And you sort of forget the journey it took to get here. And I want to think in terms of a sporting event. So the Super Bowl is going to happen in a couple of weeks, right? So the Super Bowl happens, and so maybe you're a Philadelphia Eagle fan, maybe you're a Kansas City Chief fan, and so the game happens, and then one team wins, one team loses. And if you lose, you think, oh my gosh, this is awful, and this is the worst game I've ever been through, and you forgot the journey of the first game of the year 17, 18 weeks ago, and how you kept winning, and then you lost, and then you won again, and then you lost and then you won again, and then you got to the championship, and then maybe you lost, or maybe you won. And then you have to remember that it wasn't just that one moment. It was all the moments that led up to that triumphal creation. And for all of you who are listening today, all of you who are watching this, try to think back to when we began, when Mayor Buckley first brought to your attention that we're going to spend a whole lot of money coming up with a really reimagined City Dock that's going to be better for all of us, and that you've been along for this journey. And just take that in and take in the changes that have happened and that are keeping happening through a pandemic, which we've never experienced before, and hopefully we'll never experience again. and we've moved forward and we've progressed. And so that's what I want to end with today. Just to remember as we go through this, that this is a progression and you've been a part of it. And we've listened to everything you've said. And remember to enjoy this moment, because one day it'll just be like, oh, I remember 5 years ago when I was working on that project, didn't think it would ever end. And remember that you were a part of that project and it did end in a very positive fashion. Thank you and good night.
Great, Chris. Thanks so much. Next slide. Here are some of the images that Chris was referring to. Bryce?
Thank you. And Chris has done an incredible job with this committee and providing the rest of the design team with some of the themes and direction that we're now trying to really incorporate physically and three-dimensionally into City Dock. These are a couple of examples from other places that inspire us and that we're excited about. And if you go to the next slide, this is really an opportunity to create a mosaic, if you will, of all these themes and ideas that Chris has talked about. And so here we've begun looking at where we can tell the story and what physically we have available as a canvas to tell the story. So we have some low walls. We have steps that you see there where you can do some messaging. We have the opportunity for sculpture, which we're excited about. We have the opportunity to have engravings within the pavement at our fountain and other locations that can be exciting. So this is going to be the kind of the mosaic, the canvas, if you will, where we'll be able to tell the story. And so we're excited about it. We now and tonight we want to be showing you some new examples, new designs for our park space. And it's going to be that once we really get some approval with that, that we'll be able to start to get into some detail with telling this story. Next slide, please. So, you know, as designers and planners, we always like thinking about these overarching themes that help us make decisions, because when you have a blank canvas, it can be incredibly difficult, as you know. One of the things that Chris talked about that has been a real inspiration has been the idea of industriousness. You know, this idea that we had all this industry that's happening at City Dock, and it's not only, you know, and it impacted the people who were there, and the people who lived there, worked there, et cetera. So we've thought about, you know, what the active park might be like, and we've talked more about activity tonight. You'll see more in a minute, but that may also be a place where we can talk about the various professions and the various activities and the watermen that worked here at City Dock. We also are going to have a lawn. And that may be a place of respite and a little more quiet and a place to casually access the water, dip your toe in the water, as we've talked about. The fountain area and the pergola, where we maybe can speak more to where people came from who are here in Annapolis. And then truly the gateway opportunity at Susan Campbell Park, where we see it as being more forward-looking and the opportunity to really look out towards the bay. So we're excited about that. Mahan Reichel is going to take us through these different areas and also show you the development of the plan that they have done, which I'm very excited about. So I'm going to turn it over to Scott Reichel of Mahan Reichel.
Thanks, Bryce. I appreciate everybody's time tonight and can't tell you how much I appreciate being involved in the project. It's such a prestigious project and really fun. I grew up in Anne Arundel County and used to hang out in Annapolis, and can't believe I'm back working here on such the spot in the capital city. So I'm really excited about it. And what we're about to should take you through, I think hopefully you will get excited as well. If we go to the next slide. So I'm going to start from left to right and talk about the active park. So we realized that in listening to many committees and different folks throughout the process, we've heard that people don't feel like they can come down to the city dock. They don't feel like the park, Campbell Park, is too far away. It's not approachable. So we thought, why not put the activity right off of Dock Street and capture everybody there? And that's where we put the bulk of the activity. And we can do that in a temporary way, in that we'll be able to use modular elements, as you can see down below, like that is all modular furniture from left to right. The tree can be moved, all those benches can be moved, table tennis. These are showing seesaws lit. Then the next image is a plan view of it's actually, I think, in DC. But we were thinking, should we celebrate the Nicholson plan somehow, maybe in the paving, because Annapolis is so unique in the state of Maryland. And then have some fun places to swing and swing out over the water. So all of those elements could be right in that spot. And we want that spot. I mean, one of the things we've had to think about is flexibility. The park has to be flexible. We've got to accommodate the big events like the Singer-Songwriter Festival and the boat show. And so what we can do is, that's the idea of this, that everything can be moved away, albeit with a front end loader, but you can pick up these trees, pick up all the furniture, move it and slide it in different areas to create an open space there. So if we go to the next slide. These are some more images of the elements, and you can see the Singer-Songwriter Festival. That stage is about where this area is. You can see the table tennis in the center, other, like Christmas villages, things that could happen there. Again, lower left, both of those are plan engravings in the paving that we could use to celebrate some of the famous streets in Annapolis and who live there. And you can see the planters, the trees up top would be in those planters. You can just get under them and pick them up and move them, as well as the round ones in the center image. We go to the next slide. And this is a view looking, we're actually in the park. You can see the lower left, there's a plan and an arrow showing you. We're standing there looking out toward Ego Alley. You can see table tennis, the swings off in the distance that would line Ego Alley. We're just a few steps up from Dock Street's level, and then you step up to the park. So you can see the park to the left is above you. And Dock Street is to your right. And so these are all the trees and the planters, and we could have things like foosball there, tables and chairs, umbrellas, all of which are movable. Go to the next slide. This is looking, we're standing at the promenade. So our back is, Ego Alley is to our right, and we're looking back across the park. And you can see the modular furniture, the swings right there along Ego Alley, and the trees. And you can see that this is just a step. This is the mid-level. You step up to this level from Dock Street. There's a ramp just above that plan. The map in the corner left, lower left, that's a ramp that gets you up. So it's all ADA accessible. And then of course we have ramps. You can see the ramp over to the right that gets you up to the upper level of the green lawn area. And just to the right of that is the promenade that continues at its current level. So we go to the next slide. So moving to the lawn, as Bryce said, this is sort of an area of respite, but you can come here, read a book, sit in shade. We'll have probably movable furniture that we could have out here. You can picture Adirondack chairs, things like that, that you could be in the sun or move in the shade. You can just bring a blanket and picnic. We could set up cornhole out there. We could do bocce. It's just a fun place. It's an area where you've got residents that, as everyone was saying, they live in a city that's surrounded by water, but can never get to the water. They can come here now and play on this lawn. It can be like their front lawn. So we go to the next one, we have some images. And because the lawn is elevated with the, we'll have seat walls at the edges of it. It gives us lots of opportunities, as Chris and Bryce were saying, to put in quotes, have sayings, celebrate the history, the diversity, the inclusivity. All of that can be engraved, and it gives us lots of opportunities. We go to the next one. Now we come to the fountain. If you remember before, the fountain was up front. We've decided now it's better further in the park, and the fountain is yet to be determined what we want it to be. The legacy fountain. We want it to celebrate all of the things, history, diversity. It's an active place as well. Kids will be able to get in the fountain. The nice thing about it, the design is such that the fountain is recessed. So it will actually step down so that when we do things like the boat show or singer-songwriters festival, we'll be able to come in and put platforms in and cover the fountain and make it flush with the rest of the lawn. So if we go to the next one. These are some images of, I think it's Washington Square up in New York. You can see that fountain has this tiered, we won't have quite as grand a fountain. We won't have water sitting in it, our water. We're just having pop jets that will spill back in. There'll be no standing water in this one. But you can see in the top center, there's a way we will also make it accessible. So even though it's not level, you'll be able to ramp down to it. So it'll be accessible to all kids. So we go to the next one. And then we go to the pergola, and we think we've heard a lot about shade, and more shade. The folks feel like they come down here and it's blistering hot. There's nowhere to get out of the sun. And we feel like the pergola is a great place to do that on a daily basis. It then can become a stage for an event. What's great about the location here is it plays both ways. It could play out to Campbell Park, or it can play back to the lawn fountain area. We also saw it as a great legacy, potential legacy item, where we would use, you can see the trusses that on the underside of the trellis, that we could potentially celebrate some of the ships like the schooner, the skipjack, or the cargo ships that brought the kidnapped Africans to Annapolis. Any of these could be illustrated or designed into that trellis structure. So we think that could be a fun idea. Go to the next one. And this is what we were inspired by, is looking at ships' plans and how interesting they are, and how we could fashion this trellis structure, the top of the trellis structure, to be to mimic some of the famous ships, and then have a story to tell about that. Go to the next one. This is looking into the fountain, and you can see it's recessed down. There's plenty of seating for parents to stay and watch. We've got the trellis structure beyond, and this is just a simple concept that's shown there. We haven't yet developed that at all. And same, the fountain is really in its infancy in thought process, but what we really like about it is the ability to cover it over and get the flexibility and activate the center part of the park. And again, it gives us, you see the walls and a lot of surface area that we can tell more of Annapolis's story. Go to the next. And we're also excited about is raising Dock Street. So Dock Street will become a pedestrian street. We'll no longer have cars along it. It of course will have emergency access. But if you can see our back, the Campbell Park is to the back of us. We're looking down Dock Street you can see the buildings where Dock Street jogs. And we're looking across. The fountain is just there to the left. and the pergola is off screen to the left. So we're really at the park level. So what's awesome about this is this really becomes a plaza promenade on the Dock Street side, which will really create endless opportunities along all those facades there of, you can imagine dining out into the street. So many things that could happen in this area that we're really excited about it. And we think it's great that we can finally get it to be an all pedestrian space. We go to the next. And so the gateway, Campbell Park, as we're calling it, the gateway to the bay, it really is, this part of the project we feel is really looking to the future of the bay and how the Park Service is now looking at the entire bay as a park. And we would do demonstration plantings of sustainable plants that bayscapes that are native and could show people what they could use in their own yards, perhaps. We also have, we think we could do an iconic sculpture that we could commission to have someone create a kinetic sculpture that would move in the wind, that would celebrate the industriousness or the history, some aspect. We know that if we got an artist and talked to them about our ideas and show them all our inspiration, they could come up with something amazing. This also is the place where you can get down to the water. So you will actually be able to get closer to the water like at Dinghy Dock. So it'll be the only place along there that you can do that. And we think that's another great thing, is that we're finally giving access to the water to all residents of Annapolis. We're very excited about that. So if you go to the next one. And these are some of the kinetic sculptures that you see. And I wish you could see these in motion, because when the wind is blowing, they're really dynamic. They're pretty amazing. And you can imagine this having a being lit at night and moving. I mean, it'd be really iconic and draw you out to the edge of the park. You can see the sort of stadium steps down to the edge of the park there, and the kayak dock up on the upper right. Go to the next one. And this is a view looking out from, you're looking out towards the Severn. The city's behind you. The promenade is just off screen to the right. This is actually in Campbell Park. And you can see, again, we have pathways there, plantings, and the lawn area, which is a great for smaller festivals or smaller, even just entertainment, to have a three-piece band could play and face this area. And we would again have plenty of seating. You can see we've got benches set all along there. And we've generously, you'll see in the plan that we've pulled back that edge to accommodate all the tourist boats that load and offload there. So if we go to the next one. And this is looking from Campbell Park. We're on the promenade looking up to the, the raised park area. You can see the trellis off to the right. Excuse me, getting hoarse here. And again, you see where we're just saying Dock Street Park. That's just to illustrate, and that the rectangle below that is to illustrate that these are some of the surfaces again that we can use to celebrate the legacy. And you can see it ramps up to the park, and then the ramp down to the wooden area of the promenade to access the boat area there. Go to the next one. And just so you can see the plan, the magenta and yellow arrows, I mean, we feel like when we looked at the pedestrian movements, we saw that as you come down, if you're on the Randall, on the Prince George Street side of Dock Street, if you're walking along that edge, you actually can come right up into the park, ramp up, and it takes you right up to the center of the park. Same as on the other side, when you're on the promenade, you do the same thing. You come in and you could ramp right up to the fountain area. And the same goes for the other way around. If you're out at Campbell Park, it ramps you up, and the crossing of the two parabolas actually formed a perfect circle, which we again thought, well, Annapolis is, the Nicholson plan has the circles. It celebrates that. It's a great place for it. And really, we thought tied the plan together well. So if you go to the next one. So here's the plan in plan view, which I'm sure is now can be a little clearer when you saw those images. But to the left, you see the grove of trees that are all those smaller trees in pots that are movable. The activity areas would be in and among that, the foosball, table tennis, the climbable modular furniture. The swings are out along Ego Alley. You step up from that area where you see those blue umbrellas. And then you can see a ramp just to the page north of those umbrellas. And that's a way to get vehicles when we're doing larger festivals and we need to move things and equipment up there. That's a ramp that allows you to get up to that area, to the Dock Street Park area. And then the lawn area, then you see the fountain. Again, the fountain steps down. The steps are interrupted by planters that would have seasonal annuals in them. And then you've got tables and chairs again at the trellis and just around the fountain. And again, that area steps down to Susan Campbell Park, which is at a lower elevation. And you can see Dock Street really becomes a plaza, right? It's at the same level as the park at 6.5. So if we go to the next one. So this is the view, aerial view that we've been using the old plan or the consensus plan all along, and this would be the new view of that. And I'm ready to take questions, but thanks for all of you helping us get here. And we're really excited about this and hope you are as well. So thank you.
Scott, thanks so much. I just wanted to mention to whomever is controlling the participants that we have some planning commissioners and HPC commissioners who are watching but have not been brought forward yet to participate. So they should all be brought forward.
Great job, Scott. And I just wanted to mention that, a lot of this is pretty hot off of the press and it's really coming together nicely. The vertical design that you're looking at is not in any way cooked. We are just beginning to look at those and thinking about shapes and materials and all of that. But that's not what we're looking for, a lot of approval on or direction on. But certainly the layout of this very exciting park is what we were excited to share with you, especially.
Teresa, is there a way for the other commissioners to be brought forward?
They have been brought forward.
Hey, yeah, Eileen, that was because I was sharing my screen and I can't look at the panelist list and share the presentation at the same time. So they should all be in a second.
Great.
Thank you for the presentation. It was a lot of information, a lot of details, very exciting. If we'd like to open up for questions, we'll start with quite a few of us on here. So if we can just limit our, if we have comments, great. But if we have questions, please specify which area of the presentation that you have, and we'll go ahead and open up to any questions from the commission from either. Mr. Waldman.
Well, I'm here and I'm unmuted. Thanks an awful lot.
I was wondering why.
It's not usual that I'm muted. One of the themes that really comes through here, there are several themes that come through here. One of them is you have listened. Another one is that it has really begun to achieve, when an egg is just ready to, or a meal is just ready to be served. You're almost there. It's really exciting. The third thing is that what comes through is your excitement about what's going on, and it's contagious. So the fourth one is that I look forward to continuing to cooperate and collaborate on what Mr. Haley has, which is a big task, which is having some of the smell make sense. But I think that you've really incorporated many of the things that we've said, and the pedestrian walkway along Dock Street, that big, broad, wonderful boulevard for walkers, all of the different ways that you can, and heights that you can be, the different ways that you can access the water. I think that this is really gelled in a way that is far beyond what I thought you were going to do. So, Mr. Reichel. Mr. Turner, wherever you are, there you are. Okay, continue on. We think it's great. I do. I don't see anything. I don't have any particular questions now. And Mr. Gerald, good job with the financing, brother.
Thank you, sir.
We'll pay for it in the long run.
Thank you. Ms. Butler, please.
Hi, yeah, great job, team. I'm really impressed by everything I've seen tonight and the progression over the last couple of years. I was just curious about the water access, and at the end of Susan B. Campbell Park, how we'd be able to bring in large tour boats as well as have kayaks. Has anyone thought about how that would actually work from a practical standpoint?
Diane, one of the things is the city now has what is either called the Burtis Dock or the Long Dock.
Right.
So you have that area as well for both large boats and the smaller boats, kayaks. But I'll let Scott, if you want to talk about the water access, or Bryce.
Well, that's exactly it. If I gave the impression it was at the end, it's really it's where Eileen just said, it's by Burtis House. That's the area where we have all the access down. It would be for canoes, kayaks, and you'll have steps down to the water.
Oh, and that makes all the sense in the world. Thank you. That clarifies it for me.
Sorry about that. Yeah.
No, I was just turned around where I thought that would be kind of dangerous, having big tour boats come in and kayak leaving. So thank you.
Quite.
No worries. And I'm going to run through the commissioners first for questions, and then I'll move back through staff and the rest of the attendees as well. So Mr. Pline.
Well, thanks. And thanks, as Bob said, thanks to the entire team. It does really look terrific. The thing that, echoing what Bob said, the thing that really strikes me is this is much more open layout that, as I see, framed by the promenade that goes all the way from Compromise Street, or whatever it's called at that point, all the way down to the waterfront, framed on one side, and then Dock Street is the Woon-Earth, and like Bob said, you're listening, and of course, you might have known that I would perk up when I saw you actually using that word, but of course I have. But I think that really frames the park really well, and does give you an opportunity to sort of get to the end, because we don't want people to have to work too hard to get to the end, to Susan Campbell Park in the water. So this allows them to do that, but also, I do like the circulation with this fountain in the middle, because that does draws you into the park, but you don't have to go into the park. And it just seems like it's a little bit, the prior design to me seemed to have a little bit too much of an obstacle course kind of feel to it. and definitely this does away with that. It's much more open but inviting. So I really like it. And of course, it's good that you've really thought about the how it's going to be used for the boat shows, because that's obviously really important to the city. But the only question I really had for the team, and I'm sure eventually you'll think about this and figure out ways to deal with that, but make sure that of all the greenery that's both fixed and movable, the survivability of that in a way that's not going to be really labor intensive, to make sure that stuff doesn't die quickly. So anyway, those are my comments, and once again, thank you all. It's a terrific job.
Thank you. Mr. Scott.
I don't see myself, but then I know what I look like, so I guess that's okay. But thank you for letting me speak, and I also want to join the others that have spoken in saying that I'm very excited by the design. I think that a lot of difficult issues have been worked through rather successfully, and one of my personal concerns was the whole idea of the fountain, which seems like a wonderful idea, but with our limited space constraints, I really didn't see it as a high priority. But I think the idea of recessing it and making it more flexible has really addressed my concern on that issue. So I think that's, for me, very, very satisfying to see. And I just have really one more conceptual question. Mr. Haley's presentation, unfortunately, I didn't catch all of it. So I wasn't clear. Was Mr. Haley trying to express all the different parts of our history and segments of our community that we want to address as we finalize the design and make it permanent? Or is that something that's set in stone? I mean, was he presenting sort of all of these different members of the community have spoken and we want to acknowledge them, or are we committed to acknowledging them all in some way? Just for a point of clarification, where my thinking, please.
Well, what it's more about is that our initial thought was, how can we do this? How can we possibly represent all the different ethnic backgrounds and constituencies and communities who have contributed to the history of Annapolis? And that was a daunting task that none of us thought really literally could do. And yet that's what we initially felt like we were tasked with. And we were tasked with that and thinking in terms of one individual item that was going to do it, whether it was going to be a fountain, whether it was going to be, I don't know, a walkway, whether it's going to be a statuary, whatever. But then as we started looking more closely about the overall of what we're doing, which is the whole of City Dock, then we started thinking, no, things can be put here or there throughout the park. So we don't have to feel like this one individual item that represents it all. So it takes less pressure off of that being done, and also allows us to maybe incorporate things in the fulfillment of time, which means in the future, we might add on another exhibit that represents this. Maybe it'll be signage, maybe it'll be a post or something like that. So we don't feel like it's only one shot, and as in Hamilton, one shot, and that's all you have. No, this is something that's going to be ongoing. It's going to be dynamic. It's not something that we feel that we have to get right this one time and we'll never be able to go back to it again.
Well, thank you for that clarifying.
Also, to add to your question, both is the answer. Chris has described sort of how it's all going to be laid out in numerous locations. We've gotten a lot of good ideas, but we, the legacy team, is also at the point that they're now digging down into the substance. In other words, we have the ideas, we have some of the locations, but now is the substance. What is it that we want to say to represent the diverse history of the city? So both is the answer to your question.
Great. I actually do think that was clarifying to my confusion. Both is good.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Do you have anything else?
Not for me.
Thank you. Mr. Iams.
Yes, hi, thanks. I also want to echo my other commissioners, colleagues here. I think the design is great. I really just wanted to really point out that I'm really impressed and with the transportation system downtown. I just want to give you guys kudos for that. And I'm excited about it being expanded as well. I do have some things still on my wish list for it, just having to do with, the hours that it runs. But other than that, it's great. I am concerned about, and I do have a few minor issues with the plans going forward that I'm just concerned about, just unanticipated consequences, but they're so minor, and I just am really impressed with all of this. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Levy?
There you go. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Well, thanks. I'm here thanks again for inviting us from the Historic Preservation Commission. And my first thing to say is the ideas have moved so far forward from where we were a few months ago with not only the design, but the interpretive aspects of it. And so I really compliment everybody involved for that. Again, I'm only speaking for myself, not the whole commission, but there's so many new ideas here with the interpretive concepts, and Chris Haley, of course, is doing a great job in leading that, I believe. I think as the HPC, we're looking at physical structures and impact on the view sheds, etc. And so far, this plan doesn't deviate much from what we've seen before, so that's great. Everything we've seen is good. The flood, our interest is actually about the flood prevention devices. So I hate to be wonky, but they were exactly what we've seen before. So not much has changed. So that's great. We like it on the Compromise Street, not much impact everywhere else. The new the devices that rise up when there's an emergency and drop when there's none. And also, I think there are no new structures at the edge at the edge of the dock, and the pergola or the entertainment space. It looks like it's pretty, transparent-ish. So the views from the town out to the water and the views from the water into the town are basically what the HPC is going to be looking at. So in my opinion. So also great job. I mean, the drawings were great, and you really did convey what this could look like. All very exciting. So
Thank you. Mr. Laplace.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to see the presentation and also to comment on it. I'm very impressed with the plan, the design. I think it's a strong concept, and talking about strong design concepts and thinking about what we want this to accomplish, I think the question I would raise is touching on what Mr. Scott had brought up about the fountain. We all love fountains. Fountains are wonderful parts, particularly in cities. Water feature is often a wonderful surprise when you come upon a public space. But I'm wondering why it's introduced here when this is a waterfront site. It already has water, and the focus has always been to bring people to the existing water, to the waterfront. So the fountain's nice, but I'm not sure it's necessary. So I think it almost weakens the concept of what the whole city dock park is envisioned to be and how it's supposed to function. So I would just say that I think we might want to rethink that it's a nice feature, but it's not really necessary. I think you want to keep the design of the park as simple as possible and as flexible as possible, certainly to accommodate all the wonderful activities throughout the year here on our waterfront. But that was the only thing I wanted to raise. I think the fountain's very nice. I think it's sort of not necessary or needs to be thought about whether it's really needed for this particular site. That was the point I wanted to raise.
And Michael, I'm going to ask the designers to respond, but there's been a lot of debate about the size of the fountain, along with what the ideas that you've brought up. And I think the fountain has gotten smaller in terms of wanting to create an area where people can kind of sit in the fountain, similar to the park in New York, and also where kids can kind of run through it. But your thoughts have been part of the debate in terms of the size of the fountain, and I'd ask.
Well, it actually goes beyond that, Eileen, because I thought the whole purpose of this is to have people, their eyes are out onto the existing harbor, on the water that already exists, the waterfront. Like, you're introducing a water feature and the whole waterfront's a water feature. So that's where I'm coming from.
Yeah, and I think, that's an interesting perspective for sure, and something that we should think about and others should think about. I immediately did think about, though, Archie Trader used to tell us about jumping off of the Eastport Bridge and swimming in this area, and those opportunities have kind of gone away, I think, in some ways. So, it may be an opportunity to still get wet at City Dock, but certainly you've given us something to think about there. We have just recently kind of reduced the size of the fountain a bit as well, to right size it. And obviously it's got to be adaptable to the boat show, which I think Scott's done a good job of accommodating.
Yeah, I would add that, Baltimore has the same thing. They have a fountain at the water's edge, and it's really about, they really did it because of trying to get kids that don't have a place to go and play in the water to have a place to go and play in the water. And I think that's, we really feel it as an attraction that'll be part of the inclusivity message without writing it out, that it's really going to draw kids. It's a kid magnet and a family magnet. And so I hear you, but I would say, yes, it is. It's sort of, when you say waters, why do you want water when you've got water? If we made it a reflecting pool, I would say, okay, that makes sense. You've got all this water, but this is really not that. It's really an interactive fountain that, and so that, but I think it's a good point. Thanks.
And I'll save my comments for last. Mr. Smith?
Hi, thank you. I'd like to echo the comments that it's a fantastic design. Two comments I had were that, one, my 6-year-old crawled up on my lap and she saw the fountain. Her eyes got really big and excited. And the other is about Randall Street between Compromise and Dock Street. That's still 3 lanes, and that's quite the choke point for people to be able to get to this area from Main Street. People jaywalk and climb over fences to cross Randall Street. If the Randall Street could be narrowed without needing a left turn lane into the market space area now, there's no need for a left turn lane on Randall Street. And then the right turn lane is also less needed with the reduction in parking. That would be an opportunity to improve the engagement by narrowing Randall Street in that area.
That's interesting.
I'd be all for reducing any lanes of traffic.
Well, I walk there every day and drive there every day. And having to walk across 4 lanes of traffic is a massive barrier. People just, it takes a long time. It's not safe. And it's an opportunity to improve engagement.
And if I could just jump in, Kevin, that's a great point. And I would say that, if we're going to have smart technology on Roe Boulevard to let people know how many parking spaces there are in the garage, those parking spaces at the front there should be linked to any of that kind of technology. So less people will need to turn down there. One of our big problems now is everybody comes to Annapolis and tries to park on the waterfront. When
Right.
they don't get a parking spot, they come back and they jam up Randall, and they jam up Gate 1 and the Eastport Bridge. So your point is really well taken, and I really think we can, engineer our way out of that with smart technology and reducing the size.
Could I?
Mr. Waldman?
Well, it started off with great congratulations, and now the comments are getting specifics, and that's wonderful. One of the first comments I wanted to make is that very early on, it was pointed out that the dock needs to be a place for all generations, grandparents, parents, and children. And I think that planning the fountain as a splash fountain really achieves that goal. Second thing is that circling back to the beginning of the presentation and the ferry and all of the places that the ferry can connect, the ferry dock is on the foot of Prince George Street. And so even though these plans do not specifically include Prince George Street, we should be looking to the future to enliven Prince George Street. It's got great potential for turning the backs of some of those buildings into active frontages. It should be, if there's ever a hotel or something that's built down at the end there, that the vehicular access should be on Prince George Street, and that we should really begin looking at the foot of Prince George Street as a real hub for different kinds of mobility, cars, walkers, kayaks, ferries, all sorts of things. So the foot of Prince George Street is a great opportunity. As the third point is to reducing traffic and making the whole place more pedestrian friendly. Also not a part necessarily of this plan, but in order to reduce or in order to get to Mr. Turner's goal of reducing traffic lanes wherever possible and making pedestrian crossing better, in the future, we need to look at what to do with the traffic circle and what to do with the plaza in front of Market House, and that maybe all of that can be incorporated as the real gateway, the pedestrian gateway into this wonderful arena that we're going to be creating. So with that, I'll retire.
Are you sure? Because your hand's still up.
I don't know how to get it down. Oh, there it goes.
Mr. Scott, did you have any additional questions or your hand?
No, I need to take my hand down. I'm very sorry.
Wonderful. Any other questions on behalf of any commission staff, anyone else before I give my comments?
Just one last thing.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, yeah. I mean, since Bob did open the door there on stuff that is technically out of scope, but I do think it's really important to think about how to deal with what I refer to as the Great Wall of Randall Street, because it really is it's not a highway along our waterfront like in some larger cities, but it in some ways serves as the same barrier, and anything we can do to make it better for everybody would be good. And not just to have multiple crossing spots, but if it were a little less room were dedicated to that circle, it's going to make having additional pedestrian crossings much more viable without totally messing up the traffic flow. And that's really the problem right at Dock Street and Randall is that because that's really the only place pedestrians can get to City Dock, it's kind of a mess because there's almost always somebody crossing at a busy time. So, spreading the crossings along Randall Compromise would be good, but it's in the current configuration, it's just not very practical, and it does leave. We do have a wide, too wide a street there that I would agree with. So I'm just going to pile it on there for everybody to think about. in the future. Thanks.
Ms. Butler?
Yeah, my question just has, I guess it's really to David Gerald. David, any progress being made on the Fleet Reserve? I know we talked about the practicality of having a barrier that stops at Newman Street, and the concept is that it would go past Newman Street. And in order to really be an effective resiliency barrier, we would need it to connect past Newman Street. Any progress?
Yeah, so maybe I could respond twice. I put my hand up just so I could respond to Alex as well. So I'll do that first and then I'll circle back to your question, Diane. So I think that for Randall Street, we probably need a City Dock Action Committee Part 2, because that is just too hard to take on right now and incorporate in this design. And I think we all agree that something needs to be done with that, but it was just too hard for City Dock Action Committee Part 1 to do that. I've been here since 2010, and we've tried to do various things and just ran into a stone wall. No pun intended, for doing something with the circle and with Randall Street. So I think that we keep Eileen around and that we do City Dock Action Committee Part 2 to look at that, because we really do need to look at that. That's not efficient the way it is now, and it doesn't help further what we're trying to get to with City Dock. So Diane, for that, we are looking at that side. I can tell you we've met several times with the owners of 110 Compromise, and they are not interested in participating. So that's why we're going to go around behind them, and they're going to be inside the bathtub instead of outside the bathtub. 110 the Fleet Reserve is very interested, and they've hired their own contractor to design firm to start doing design. So we need to continue down the stretch there, but yeah, we are having those conversations. The other tricky part is on the Navy side too. So they have a very well-developed plan, but they're behind us on the implementation of their plan. So we need to do something over there temporarily until they can implement their flood mitigation plan, or else we'll get backdoor flooding through the Naval Academy. So we're looking at that closely, and we're in conversations with them as well.
Thanks.
So echoing what Mr. Waldman said about the fountains, I think having the fountain is more of an activity versus a visual thing against the water. And I agree with him as far as intergenerational access. I have my 2 nieces coming to town this summer, and I've been thinking about things to do with them because they have 2 5-year-olds. And downtown would never have occurred to me, because unless we have money, they have money, there's nothing for them to do downtown other than eat and shop. They're 5. But as if there was a fountain downtown, we're walking distance, and we'd probably spend the whole summer there. And I think that's something that's missing when we talk about families in this region and just inclusivity and so on. There's not a lot of access to, there may be access to visually see waterfront, but not to participate in waterfront. And I think that's what the fountains would bring. There are other major cities that are along the water that have fountains like this in place, Boston being one, Chicago being another, and they are children and family magnets. And I think that's what's missing. So I don't see this as an unnecessary perk. I think it's a very necessary amenity and activity that would thrive and brighten the opportunities for families living in the region. The other question I have is just as far as public participation. So as this, as we made progress on this build and visuals and so on, I'm wondering if there's what the plans are to share some of this information of progress with the public prior to incorporate any ideas or concepts or so on to showcase and get some feedback to make sure that we're on the right track on what's being proposed and developed. And number 2, as a way of fundraising and monetizing some of the builds that are going in. For example, some of the promenade that is using maybe some brickway or some other type of element that's going to be there permanently. Are there ways to utilize those to have sponsorships for bricks or sponsorships for other types of permanent installments that could generate revenue and have some long-term presence, in the city as the city grows? So those are my 2 comments. So really it's just one, public participation and the intention there going forward in the short term.
Well, I can address part of that. When we met with the City Dock Action Committee, the idea of meeting with them, and there were about 60 people on the call, is that then many of those people represent other groups. I've heard back from the Downtown Partnership. I've heard back actually from the Navy. I've heard back from 2 other groups. So we will now, over the next 2 months after we've been to the Planning Commission, we will now start to go out and share this with other groups, both groups that are now starting to come to us, as well as parts of the community that typically aren't involved and I think would be really interested in the legacy team and a lot of that work. So that's over the next couple of months what we'll roll out. But again, we start with the City Dock Action Committee and then the Planning Commission and HPC, and then we go broad.
All right, do we have any other questions before we can close out this item? Wonderful. Mr. Mayor, Eileen, do you have any closing comments?
No, it's just terrific every time we meet with these 2 bodies together, because we get a melding of thoughts and perspective, and it's so helpful for the development of an incredible project.
And I would say, Teresa, you run a great meeting.
That's because Mr. Wallman was muted for the first hour.
And I'm excited because I think that we're all part of history. You know, this is the next phase for the City Dock for the next 50 or 100 years, right? And it's been many things, but now it's going to be a thing of beauty, and it's going to have things that are accessible to everyone. Not only will the fountain and that be a free thing to do, but you'll be able to get on a ferry, some of the ferries for free, to go to Eastport or come in from Eastport, or take your bike over to Cars Beach, or some of the things that I talked about. So, you know, this gateway that we're creating, and I can't stress enough how exciting it is to have the National Park Service as a partner, and have not just this park, but the whole historic district be part of a park. You know, a walkable piece of history, you know, with so many different things to look at. You know, what's been exciting about this process is there's so much to work with. And so it's a team effort. We got the best team ever here. And I'm just very grateful for all you've done.
Thank you. And thank you so much for taking the time and for the attention and detail.
I'll make one more comment.
Yes, sir.
The level of detail in the drawings for the design team that have been brought forward tonight have given us an idea of what it's going to look like. So I have a lot of respect for the people who have been working to create the vision that we can actually see when we're trying to communicate to the public what this might look like, or will look like. So thank you to them.
Thank you. And recognizing that it does take quite a team to pull this kind of information together, we do appreciate your time and bringing this to us. And that will close out item 1 of our agenda. I believe that's item 1. I could be wrong.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much. So we will move on to the next item on our agenda, and that is the approval of the minutes from the last meeting on January 19th. Those have been distributed, I believe. Do I have any comments, questions, or edits or concerns on those from the commission?
I move that we approve the minutes from the last meeting.
Thank you. Have a second?
I'll second that.
And can we take a vote? All in favor? Aye.
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 Thank you. Any abstentions, opposition? Seeing none, that motion is passed. And that brings us to the end of our meeting. So final item on the agenda is adjournment. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Fantastic, Mr. Iams. Do I have a second?
Second.
And all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. This meeting is now adjourned. Thank you to everyone